Good afternoon and welcome to our Fireside Chat that has become a monthly feature hosted by Horwath HTL India. I have today as a guest Mr. Hari Marar, who is the Managing Director and CEO of Bangalore International Airport Limited. And we decided to bring in somebody from outside the hotel industry because we feel that that would give a great perspective from a travel, aviation sense to our audience and to all of you. So before I go into introducing Hari, just a quick housekeeping. As you all know, everybody is muted. Just except Hari and I will be able to speak. Of course, we'll be happy to take your questions. Please post your questions at the allotted places, depending on whether you're using a desktop or a laptop, whether you're using a web browser or a mobile app. Our team will be looking for the questions and will feed those to me via WhatsApp. But unfortunately, we cannot allow you to ask the questions directly so that we can have a easy and smooth conversation between Hari and myself. I hope you do find this interesting. Hari, would you like to join us, please?
Hello, Vijay. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Hari. Thank you for joining us and for making the time from your busy schedule. Given the fact that you're sort of somewhat unknown to the hotel industry, although you are previously a hotelier yourself, I'm going to take a minute to introduce Hari. As I said, he's the MD and CEO of Bangalore International Airport. So he runs the Kempegowda International Airport, but not only that, he runs the whole airport city there, and it's not just what you see now, it's a new city that's being developed there. He's also looking at a massive expansion program at the international airport. I believe that's giving him about 13,000 crores of a capital program to be implemented. So he's got lots of money, but he's got lots of responsibilities. And Hari has been sort of previously, as I said, he started his career in hotels. Or at least he was in hotels, maybe something else before that I don't know about. He was also with Jet Airways before he took up this position. And I think an important thing is that in 2019, he was one of 4 members appointed to the Heathrow Expansion Advisory Board. And that is something, you know, to advise on a £32 billion expansion program. What I find very interesting is that he was the only person from the aviation field. Now, I sometimes understand now how, with our former British background of the British bureaucracy in India, how we sometimes have people on committees who have little experience on that committee. Of course, Hari is an exception here. He is from the aviation field. So with that, Hari, let me sort of ask you the question about Kempegowda International Airport, but also the Bangalore airport city. Tell us, you know, we are hotel people in the, mainly on this chat. What is it like to run an airport? I mean, you've got people, you've got planes, you've got passengers, you've got staff, you've got so many things there, and you've got a lot of VIPs. So what are the challenges?
Vijay, you've got me started off on a meaty subject, but the problem is that the answer to that can be so long that it can consume the entire 1 hour that we have slotted for ourselves. So let me try and make it as concise as possible, and let me try and make it as precise as possible. Let me start by talking about what might be the 3 most defining characteristics of an airport. First and foremost is the fact that an airport as an asset does not belong to anyone. I mean, normally there are questions asked as to who is the owner of this airport, and then one talks about airport ownership companies like GMR, JVK, Fairfax in our case, and so on and so forth. But our belief as the ownership, and since I represent Fairfax, the infrastructure business in India, I also speak on behalf of the ownership. From an ownership and management standpoint, first thing that you have to remember is no one ever owns the airport. The airport belongs to the people. And therefore, you're in charge of a public asset, a national asset, to be honest. And therefore, as a national asset, you can never have the privilege of ownership, but you have the responsibility of being the custodian of that asset over a period of time. So first of all, I think custodianship of a national asset is one of the defining features of running an airport. Secondly, when you are in charge of a public asset, you don't have the freedom to do with assets what that you own. For instance, if you own a hotel, you can decide what you want to do with it, expand it, add features to it, reduce features from it, and so on and so forth. Whereas here, since it belongs to the people, anything that you do here has to go through a deep consultative process, that has to involve a really wide, diverse stakeholder group. And that's the other important thing that you've got to remember, that the second defining feature is that it's got probably the most diverse and complex stakeholder group that you can imagine. Anybody in civil society is really a stakeholder of an airport. The passengers who use it, the public at large, the communities who live around the airport, people who do business at the airport, the taxi drivers, to airlines, to all the ground handlers, and so on and so forth. Everyone's a stakeholder, and you have to carry your stakeholders with you. Third defining feature is that we are probably the largest and the most obvious natural monopoly that you can see in the private space, a private monopoly. So you can imagine the burden of proof always rests with us. The burden of proof that we are running the business in an ethical fashion, in a transparent fashion, in an inclusive fashion, and so on and so forth, always rests with us. So it's from that standpoint, the monopoly part is one of course, the fact that it puts a lot of burden on you to make sure you're running the business in a responsible fashion. But the other very important thing to remember, Vijay, is that in a competitive environment, there are triggers and there is a motivation for you to excel. There is a need for you to continue to improve customer experience. There is a need for you to continue to deliver exceptional result in terms of financial results, or so on and so forth. But in a natural monopoly, what is your motivation? And from a leadership standpoint, it's very important to be able to define a cause or a sense of purpose bigger than beating your competition. And in our case, it's the fact that you're part of nation building. To harness the power of nation building and give it to the people to get them motivated to work is another massive challenge. To describe what it means to run an airport, let me sort of define, and I'm going to summarize it very quickly to two parts. There's the aeronautical side of the business. The aeronautical side of the business, is all about planning and designing what the aeronautical features of this airport must look like over a long-term period, to build it up in pace with the growing demand, to run these facilities. Broadly speaking, there are three areas. There is the terminal building. Everything where the aircrafts are parked is known as the air side, and everything on the other side is known as the city side or land side. So land side, terminal, and air side are three broad areas where the functioning of the airport and the airport entity happens. And the other aspect of running an airport is about managing the entire campus. And that I liken to being a bit like the governor of a small city. It's like governing a small city. And that's what I really do on a day-to-day basis. Because the 4,000-acre campus, there are hundreds of buildings. We run everything from the road networks in the campus to the utilities, the power, the water, the sewage treatment, everything across the entire campus. It's really like running a city. So planning that for a 50, 60-year horizon, making sure all the little steps that need to be taken to build up to that big picture are taken, to operate and manage that in an efficient manner is all part of the scope of the airport operator. So that's in a nutshell what the business looks like.
So I'm going to ask you a question. You said, monopoly, competition. Let me ask you a question there. From a city point of view, and that's where an element of competitiveness can come in, directly or indirectly. What makes what? Does the airport make the city, or does the city dictate and make the airport?
Excellent question. So Vijay, the way I look at it is that it's a symbiotic relationship. I think both sort of depend on each other in varying degrees. So let's start with, how does the airport contribute to the city? And then I'll talk about how the city sort of makes the airport itself. So from an airport's perspective, I think it's the biggest value driver from an economic standpoint is the air connectivity that a city has. It has, there is a National Council of Applied Economics Research, NCAR study that has evaluated the value that an airport adds to the city. So apart from the normal multipliers, $1 of investment in the airports brings $100 of benefit to the economy, and so on and so forth. Apart from that, in a study done in India, it has shown that every arrival passenger to Delhi, the study was specifically done in Delhi, but I think it can be applied anywhere else. Every passenger who arrives into the city brings in economic value added of 11,000 rupees to the city from a gross economic value added perspective. This is in terms of direct, indirect, and induced impact. The guy who comes in uses public transport, taxis, hotels, and pays taxes, and from there on it goes back to farmers who supply to hotels. And so if you take the entire value chain, direct, indirect, and induced impact, total economic value, gross value added is roughly around 11,500 rupees per arrival passenger, and arrival passengers are in millions in airports, and this is across domestic and international put together. The other very important thing that the airport provides to the city is connectivity, and I think everyone recognizes that airports were always built around centers which provided them connectivity, because connectivity is key to trade, and that's really critical from from a city's perspective. So the better connected the city is, the better the chances are for the economy to grow and for the businesses to grow, for people to reach different parts of the world, and so on and so forth. And it's also really so if you just take a look at Bangalore Airport's case, the total collection to the exchequer from pure customs perspective in Bangalore Airport in 1 year is about 11,000 crores. And that's just direct customs duty collections at the airport. And take for example how that's come into play during this pandemic. The fact that we've been able to get critical supplies, oxygen concentrators, medicines, and all that supply chain to the city. So connectivity and trade are an integral value that the airport brings to the city. And on the other hand, the city itself defines the airport. I often say in my presentations that the greatest strength that we have as Bangalore Airport is that we are the airport of the city of Bangalore. And I think that is, honestly, one can't take that away from us. We're the gateway to this vibrant, beautiful city. And what I find exciting about Bangalore, and that's how the quality of the city adds to the airport. What I like about the city of Bangalore is, number one, it is the knowledge capital of India. So it's really the home to the knowledge economy. And knowledge economy is characterized by large employment. It's a people's business, and it's got a large number of people, and people have to travel for businesses. So that's one attribute that immediately impacts the number of travelers through the airport, because of the IT, ITES, BT, business process outsourcing, and so on and so forth, biotechnology. All these businesses require a lot of travel from a corporate standpoint. Secondly, these are people-intensive businesses, so it attracts a large number of educated migrant labor. So I remember in 2016 or 17, the Hindu carried an article that said that 47% of urban migrant educated population, so it's educated urban migrant population, 47% of that in India came to Bangalore. So you see, there are people from all parts of India, and this is largely due to the cosmopolitan nature of the city of Bangalore and the weather it has, and so on and so forth. But people love to come here and work. What this means is that all of them have to go back to their families for Diwali vacation and for summer vacations. Their families have to come and visit them. All adds to travel. And then, of course, the fact that they're all in the knowledge business also means that they are young and they have disposable income, which means they all take one international holiday and one domestic holiday every year with family. So, these are all the aspects of the city that make the airport itself. And that's what, I think it's a highly symbiotic relationship.
And therefore, it sort of, at least indirectly, adds to the need for competitive quality, for value. The city pushes you, and sometimes you push the city. But
absolutely.
One point, you touched on a point which actually is a perfect segue into the next question. And I think this is the golden question. You talked about all the IT sector, the travel, the need for travel for all that work. When will that resume? That's what everybody wants to know. The hotel sector wants to know, when will that resume? When will we get the flow of guests with the right profile that will use hotels at different segments? What do you see happening?
Well, give me a second. Let me take out my crystal ball. I need to look into that.
No, get the crystal ball, forget all the predictions about, waves on waves and no waves and all of that. But what do you see, what do you hear from the business community, from the aviation sector, from whoever that you're able to talk about?
All right. So, in an environment like this, one can only look at where has travel resumed, and look to that as a likely indicator of what's likely to happen in India. So today, just a couple of minutes on what's happening today. Today, travel has got practically eroded. So just before the second wave hit us, we had recovered to about 65% of pre-COVID levels of traffic, which is a good sign. And we were anticipating that to go to up to 80 to 85% by the end of the calendar year 2021. That's roughly where we were heading to in the way we had predicted it. Then, of course, the second wave happened, and today we are at about 10 to 15% of pre-COVID levels. So it's eroded a large volume of traffic. What is the quality of traffic that's happening right now? So most of the people who are traveling right now are, first of all, there is still a lot of migrant labor that's traveling through airports, not the spenders, not the ones who stay in hotels. They're just people getting from one place to the other in search of a job, or getting to their place of work. And the reason they're doing this is because, of course, train connections are very low right now. So a large segment of people who normally travel by train have come to air travel. Secondly, people who are traveling, because of bereavement in the family, or to visit friends and family they haven't seen for many years, and so on and so forth, and for helping out with people who are sick and things like that. So largely that's the area where travel is happening, and not the kind of travel that sustains our businesses normally in hotels and aviation. We're seeing that there are going to be, and the reason for this is current lockdown. So the first step towards resumption of travel is going to be easing of lockdown. Now, you've seen in the last 2 weeks, a few of the state governments have already eased the lockdown restrictions. And as a result, we are seeing the first surge already. So from the first week of June, when we were at about 10% of pre-pandemic levels, we've already reached about 15 to 20% in this 1 week's time, already reached about 15 to 20% of pre-pandemic levels. I speak to my colleagues in the airline business, and from the airlines, forward-looking indications are that almost 50% of the planes should be back in the air by July, and all these planes should be operating at about 60 to 65% seat load factors, which means I would imagine we are back to about 35% of pre-pandemic levels of traffic. We should be back to that by July, August, that time frame. And but it's not likely to sort of go back to pre-COVID levels too rapidly. Now, if you look at the markets where it has almost touched pre-COVID levels, I think the one example that you've got to look at is United States. United States has touched about 90% of pre-COVID levels. And the principal reason for that is because almost 70% of the population has been vaccinated. And I think, Vijay, the biggest driver for us to achieve some semblance of normalcy and get back to pre-pandemic levels is to get the population vaccinated. I don't think there's anything as important as that. So while on one side, our responsibility is advocacy and campaigns and making sure that people are vaccinated, on the other hand, of course, vaccines have to be available as well. But getting that in place is going to bring domestic travel back. Big question is around international travel. International travel is going to be a lot more complex because domestic travel, everything is within our control, and we can decide, governments and local stakeholders can decide very quickly what are the protocols to be put into place to enable this. Whereas international, I think it's a far more complex game. To arrive at protocols that are acceptable to all countries, right? And from what I see, and I've been interacting with airlines internationally, with aviation bodies internationally, and everyone sees that it's a combination of, one, vaccination, having double vaccination, two, having recovered from COVID, and third, testing. So recovery from COVID is also seen as a sort of a qualifying criteria, so to say, for travel. But between these three and testing protocols, better and smarter and more reliable testing protocols, between these three, they will form the crux of what will become ultimately the health passport. And once that is formed, will borders truly open up. Till then, we will continue to have bilateral arrangements, which are called air bubbles and so on and so forth. I mean, fancy terms, but effectively, what are they? I mean, they are bilateral arrangements between two countries saying that, yeah, we trust each other's protocols, let's travel. But for the barriers to be lifted across the board requires the evolution of a global standard for travel, something along the lines of a health passport.
Yeah, and if you look at those tests, I mean, and I'm not disagreeing with you at all, but if you look at those tests and the fact of where our vaccination programs are, what you're effectively saying is that by the end of this year, we're not going to see, before the end of this year, we're not going to see too much of international travel, if any, and 2022 is going to see some of it gradually, hopefully, but maybe faster. Maybe Q1 22 will see some stuff if we've got a decent amount of vaccinations done and we don't have too much of a third wave or none of it at all. And that sort of seems to be the consistent messaging that seems to be effectively coming out. I mean, you know, authorities will always have the extensions bit by bit, but it looks like that's going to be much more likely the situation. I mean, you take even a country like Singapore. I mean, they've just gone with a few cases, but in their case, that becomes big. They've just canceled everything up to September, including the F1 and everything else. So, you know, they're just going into big measures.
That's right. If I were to hazard a guess, the way to define this would be, if you were to put timelines to this, full recovery of domestic travel by the financial year 23-24, and full recovery of international traffic by the financial year 24-25.
Wow, that's long. Domestic travel 23-24. So we are looking at almost 3 years from now.
That's right.
Or maybe the first part of that year, maybe it's 2.5 years from now.
So two things that are going to be, you know, one can argue, if all these restrictions are removed, why can't travel come back immediately? Two reasons. One, I think there have been significant changes to the demand for air travel, and that are going to impact this in the medium term. Long-term things are different, but medium term. And secondly, how quickly are airlines capable of scaling back and start there?
I was going to ask you that question. Do they have the capacity? With so many airlines having struggled financially, what will happen with capacities of the airlines?
I think that's the one factor that's going to really affect this. So across the ecosystem, I think you know, travel, tourism, hospitality as a sector has suffered, and I think my colleagues in the hotel business will also agree that it's been a really tough time. And you know, there hasn't been any support from the government, except for this recent one announcement for 200 crores of loan that they will give unsecured and stuff like that. But if you leave that aside, really nothing much to go by. And therefore, I would, you know, many of the airlines are really struggling right now. You probably heard about the fact that Indigo is today burning anywhere between 16 to 19 crores of cash every single day. Now that's a really, which is about 7,000 crores.
Yeah,
lots of money, 7,000 crores in a year. So that's the sort of money that airlines are burning at this point of time. What is their appetite for burning cash? I remember just before the pandemic, the beginning of the pandemic, you know, in mid 2020, Indigo was sitting on almost 12,000 crores of cash. I am suspecting that they've eroded a large amount of that cash today. Now, you know, in this environment, for them to scale back immediately, to refinance themselves, and to make sure that they're capitalized adequately to support the growth, it's going to be a tough ask. So I think airlines will struggle.
And even the international airlines. I mean, you know, it's not just that the airlines in India are struggling. The international airlines are struggling because all their boxes are sitting on the ground. And
That's right.
And to that extent, I mean, even when they have to resume, they're going to prioritize the sectors that make them the money. They're not just going to go everywhere. So I think you're right that the international is going to take a long time to settle down. And then in the interim, we'll have to see how the domestic airlines cope with their own international operations, whether, Vistara is now looking to go international in a bigger way, what happens with Air India's privatization. It'll be interesting to see how all of that works out. But tell me, you have gone ahead at BIAL with your Terminal 2 expansion and some of the other expansions in the airport. So obviously there is a longer term, either just the vision of it or the goal of it. Tell us a little more about that.
So I'm going to break that response in two parts. One part is that, to be perfectly honest, our 13,000 crore expansion program had commenced a long time back. It had commenced in 2018. When the pandemic hit us in March, April 2020, so ours is a very large project. 13,000 crores is actually a sum of several small projects, out of which the centerpiece is Terminal 2. But there are many more things. There is the whole highway expansion. There is the Trumpet flyover that leads into the airport being expanded. The road network inside the airport being expanded from 2 lanes to 5+5 lanes. The water supply, electric, the power substations and the entire utility network across the campus. The water treatment and sewage treatment setup, and so on and so forth. There's and of course the airside infrastructure and things like that. So out of which some parts had already been completed. For instance, the second runway had been operationalized in December 2019, and the associated airside infrastructure had been operationalized, firefighting, the fire station, and so on and so forth. Out of the remaining projects, which is, let's say, 75% of the projects that were remaining, we had completed 55%. So we were already in a very advanced stage. So first of all, there's no turning back. We have to complete those projects. On the other hand, given a choice, would I have rebound something? Would I have not gone ahead with the expansion program? I think commitment to the expansion program remains exactly the same. Maybe I would have delayed it by 1 year if I had the option. But honestly, I think this capacity requires to come back. See, in 23-24, when I say we come back to pre-COVID levels, by 23-24, that means Terminal 1 is back to the full capacity that it was, because it was already over capacity. You would remember there were times when there were long queues and so on and so forth at Bangalore airport, and which means by 23-24 we are there. And airport investments and airport construction is minimum 3 to 4 years. So which means I would have to be constructing during this period in any case. So from that standpoint, even if I had a choice, I would have continued with the construction. We have taken a delay. We have accepted that delay, and by middle of next year, we'll sort of complete this whole thing. But we were fortunate, Vijay, that we had the opportunity to be able to complete this project. The reason is, while 13,000 crore is the total cost, our equity contribution was roughly in the region of, that was funded partially, 20% equity, 80% debt. Our 20% equity we had expended even before the pandemic. So you see, we had only debt drawdown to do, and the banks have been very comfortable releasing the funds to us, because they've seen our equity is already committed and expended. That's right, and therefore we've been getting regular drawdowns, and we have no problem. We have the full runway from a financial standpoint to be able to complete this project.
Yeah, and I agree with you that pre-COVID, your Terminal 1 was sort of overdone. It was sort of, it was congested at many times of the day. You had what, about 34 million passengers a year. I think the expectation was that by 25 or so, you would have been at about 63 million, which would have been equivalent of what Delhi was in 2019. And if I remember the numbers right, by 2030, Bangalore was expected to be what Heathrow was in 2019. So it was a big growth, and I can imagine that for a city like Bangalore, that kind of growth will come back at some point. It's just a question of tiding through this period, and that's where I guess the hotel sector is going to be struggling if the flow of visitation sort of starts stabilizing 23, 24, 25. But do you see any changes of travel patterns that would be relevant for the hotel sector? I mean, let's look at the fact that you're continuing with your expansion of the Taj Hotel there, and you've just announced a big other project there. do you see any favorable factors that could help the hotel sector, or something that we should address?
Okay, there are going to be changes to travel patterns for sure. First and foremost, I think so. Let me give you the motherhood statement to start with. I'm a big believer in the fact that once we've gone past this pandemic and we've got a large part of the population vaccinated, and there is a annual vaccination program, there is a runway for that. I think I'm a firm believer in the fact that demand will come roaring back. I believe that, while mankind has evolved on the basis of man's innate desire for quest, to experience, to travel, to touch, to explore. And I refuse to believe that any of this can be replaced through a virtual medium. It is not possible. Virtual mediums at best can fill the gap when we can't physically travel. And I think that's what is happening today. For instance, if you and me had the option of sitting on a stage in front of a live audience, we wouldn't be doing this on this platform. So clearly, these are just via medias. Largely, I believe that businesses can be negotiated on a virtual platform, but to sign, you still need a firm handshake. You need to look into the other person's eyes, have a meal before you finalize the deal, because trust is best formed face to face. So I think I'm a firm believer in the fact that travel will come back. Yet there are some fundamental shifts that one is going to see. I'm sure all of us will recognize that there is some element of corporate travel that used to happen earlier, which was discretionary in nature. For instance, every company used to send their people abroad for plant visits, for to meet with clients, and so on and so forth, which is not mandatory, but we all felt value in it because that added to the learning of the employees, that gave them a different experience, that kept them motivated, and so on and so forth. Some part of such discretionary travel will disappear for the medium term. I think in the long term, it'll come back because there is a value to that kind of travel as well. But in the medium term, some of that will go away. But business travel for the sake of conducting business, corporate, will continue to happen. At the same time, a lot of discretionary travel from a personal standpoint will go up dramatically. And I think this pandemic has taught us all about the frailty of life and the importance of accumulating experiences in the limited time that we might have on this earth. So I think there is suddenly this huge desire that people have that I want to go out and experience this world. I want to have more and more unique experiences that will give rise. And I think there is no experience greater than traveling to another place. And I think, therefore, personal travel, holiday travel will go up. We saw that for a brief period between September and Jan.
It was fantastic. It was fantastic. The hotel sector saw it absolutely take off. Yeah.
And I think that as a trend is here to stay, because people have realized that the journey of life is not to find the shortest way to get from birth to death, but actually it's about learning the joys of experiencing every moment. How do I immerse myself in the moment? How do I really take joy out of sipping a cup of coffee to looking out at the greenery and so on and so forth? For instance, as a general practice, I used to be on my phone. I used to pride myself that I used to complete my telephone conversations and my emails during my journey between my home and the airport. And today, Vijay, I keep my phone aside and I try and take in the sights and the sounds of the city. I take in as much as I can, because I don't know, I've missed it for, God knows I've missed it for how long. So I think that's another trend that will come back in a big way, that people will come back to travel. Last but not the least, I foresee that during this period, when there is a lot of uncertainty, one of the things that I've observed is there are many short-term trends that are coming up. So for example, at the beginning of the pandemic, we saw staycations as a concept coming up, right? And suddenly everybody was saying, let's take a staycation because we want to go and stay while I'm in the city. Let me go and stay at a city hotel and enjoy. Now, I think from around December, Jan onwards till about March, the whole concept of workations came up, where people went on vacations but stayed in Goa, but were ostensibly working from Goa or from Hawaii or where have you. I have a close friend whose daughter is working in Hawaii, staying for 3 months in a hotel. So workations came up. And then there are hotels that have found opportunities within this crisis to convert some of their floors into shared working spaces. Again, a short-term trend. It's not something that's likely to. So I think it'll be a big mistake not to respond to these short-term trends. In fact, I think a future medium-term trend will be a whole series of short-term trends. And I think
Yes,
that is
because it's going to have to need a lot of agility to be able to respond to short-term demands or to quick changes. But tell me a little bit more about the Bangalore airport city that you're developing. And I know that you had plans for a lot of real estate, commercial events, and all of that. And maybe that's got pushed back a little bit because of the COVID. But what's your perspective of that in the sort of the medium term, the longish term, and the longer term?
Okay. So for those who are not familiar, in the 4,000-acre campus that we have, which we operate under a concession agreement with the government of India, the remit that we have is to reserve as much land as is required for aviation functions without compromising on that one bit. And having done that, the balance land is available for commercial real estate monetization. So we have about 530 acres of land, which is proposed to be converted into an airport city. Now, an airport city is exactly what it is. It's a city, but within an airport campus. And there aren't many examples of airport cities, but some of the more prominent examples of airport cities that you can find are Incheon Airport in South Korea, or the Schiphol Airport and Changi to a smaller extent, but and so on and so forth. At 530 acres is a lot of space. So we had Atkins master plan this space, and we're looking at a development plan spread across 12 years that converts 530 acres into a multi-use real estate environment. So amongst the things that are planned here are business parks, IT parks, convention center, retail, entertainment, dining, concert arena, convention center, and hospitality, and so on and so forth. And some elements of high-tech manufacturing and so on and so forth. So it's a really a multi-use environment, but it's set in a really from a design perspective, it is designed along three core principles of sustainable, smart, and vibrant. Now, sustainable and smart, everybody understands, but what we mean by vibrant is create an environment of vibrance, which comes from third spaces, which means a city is no fun if it's only about work. You must have work, play, create. So it's going to be centered around creativity and play and things like that. So that is really what the airport city is all about. We finished the master planning in early 2020, and we were just about to kickstart our road shows to take it to investors, attract investments as well as asset classes to come forward to us when the pandemic hit us. Despite that, I think, Vijay, what's been very encouraging is the sort of interest that we have seen in the business in all the aspects of the airport city. So the deals that we have signed during this pandemic are, one, the concert arena. We have already awarded the contract for the concert arena. The construction is beginning middle of this year, and by middle to end of next year, the concert arena will be ready. Two, we have signed a deal with a very large company, an international company, to set up a cloud kitchen on 6.5 acres of land. Then there is a 3D technology park which brings in the most sophisticated 3D technology in the world, and will actually print aircraft components, sophisticated engineering components right inside our campus. So these are three deals that we have already signed. Of course, the Indigo MRO is upcoming. Then there is, of course, the Shell facility, which is a truck parking facility, and so on and so forth, which are more or less operational in nature. Next, what you will see is that at least 8 to 12 million square feet of office space that will come up in the next 3 to 6 years. Construction will begin soon, but I'm saying operationalized between 3 to 6 years from now, supported by convention center, hospitality district, and things like that. We will also kickstart our work on the retail, entertainment, and dining. So in the next 6 years, our plan is to develop and operationalize about 176 acres out of the 530 acres. And we feel, given the interest that we have seen, this is possible. Maybe a year's delay at most, but we see that this is clearly possible. We see a lot
So
of
you're
excitement.
saying that by 26, 27, we should have about 12 million square feet of commercial space, give or take, in at the Bangalore airport city, besides the concert arena, and of course the combo 775 room combo hotel that you've signed up, and of course the 3D thing that you talked about.
That's
The
right.
3D part you talked about. I think that's commendable. I mean, the important thing is it creates demand that's a little more captive in nature rather than being spread into the whole of Bangalore. Of course, without sort of constraining it from moving out from the airport city as well, or being able to handle other demand. Tell me, in terms of regional airports, there's this new concept of work cities. Or work, yeah, I think what's it called? Work from home cities. Sorry. So work from home towns. I think that's the right word. Where people who were otherwise working in a Mumbai or a Bangalore or a Gurgaon could now go back home, wherever home was, and then work from there on a remote basis. Which means that there would be a lot more people working from the second tier cities, the third tier towns, and still serving their employers based in the metro cities. Assuming that that does gain, that does retain an element of energy even post COVID. What does that mean for airports? The hub and spoke model or the regional airports? How do you see that translating? If do you have a view on that?
Well, COVID or no COVID, I think regional airports were always meant to, or regional towns. So I think there was always a need in India to create more urban centers, right? I think India's urban centers are too concentrated. And I think there's a requirement from an urban planning standpoint to create more urban centers. And therefore the smart city plan to promote development of all towns which have got a population of 2 million and more and so on and so forth, which the union government is looking at. But that apart, I think there is regional towns and therefore regional airports hold great promise. But I think personally, this is my personal view, I've heard of work from home towns and things like that. I think the younger population is going to be focused on, if they have an option to work from somewhere, I think they would rather work from a Goa than to work from their hometown. Then, I can imagine the allure of that. Having said that, I think there are a couple of things that will determine how successful this will turn out to be. First and foremost, the digital infrastructure that's available to enable this to happen. I think the technology is going to play a big role, because even in big towns, I think you've seen issues of bandwidth constraints, failing internet signals, because of which people are complaining about the fact that meetings are not as effective as they used to be when you were sitting face to face. Now, if you take that, if people are taken to smaller towns where probably the connectivity is even bigger of a challenge, unless that develops, I think that would be one element that needs to be addressed. Secondly, I would imagine connectivity between these centers, between these smaller towns and big cities. We, for one, I'm going to digress a bit. I'm going to give you one example of one of the big bets that we are taking. I don't know whether you're aware of this, Vijay, or not, but we have signed an agreement with Virgin Hyperloop to examine the viability of a Hyperloop connection between Bangalore Airport, Bangalore City, and Mysore City. And
wow.
Right? So if that happens, Mysore City is probably 30 minutes away from Bangalore Airport, right? Lesser than that. I'm just rounding up the numbers, but it could be lesser than that. And in fact, yesterday I had a meeting with the CEO of Virgin Hyperloop, and yesterday we've decided to put the framework in place to take the proposal forward. And we're talking about establishing the first track within the airport boundary, which is the proof of concept, and then expand that to a pilot project, and then a more larger commercial project. But look at the potential of this. This would mean that Mysore becomes Bangalore's backyard, and literally people could live in Bangalore, work on a daily basis in Bangalore, and go back to their towns as well. So I think there is a great potential. And from that point, your first question would be, your immediate question would be, would that threaten the existence of airports per se? Because suddenly people are either working from smaller towns or they're, and I think we've sort of foreseen that coming. And therefore, Our larger game plan, Vijay, is to look at the airport not centered around the runway, which is our most important currency right now that we have is the runway, but not centered around the runway, but we are focusing on developing the airport and positioning it as a future hub of multi-modes of transport. So future multimodal transport hub. So what we're saying is that it brings together various modes of transport, uses technology and creative design to enable people to make seamless transfers between these modes of transport. So it doesn't matter what form of transport it is, planes and trains and cars of today, or it could be the hyperloops or the drone taxis of tomorrow. But all of them, this is the point at which you can make that interchange and really convert the airport into a future multimodal transport hub. So that's how we look at tapping into this future ecosystem.
So effectively, I can land into Bangalore in the morning, reach Mysore, do my day's work in Mysore or my sightseeing in Mysore, come back to Bangalore in the evening, and either fly out or stay at a hotel near Bangalore airport and then travel away.
That's right. Once Hyperloop comes in, it'll be easier to get to Mysore than Hebal.
Yeah. And then and with your traffic systems being what they are, then Mysore will become even better. Yeah. Tell me, it's this is so fascinating, but given the large district that you have there, and I know you're very conscious of sustainability, but let's look at two aspects of the airport district, the airport operations, sustainability and technology. What essential role or what optional role, and I'm leaving that sort of question open, do both these play in the future of the airport city?
I see both of them as not, first of all, they're not even optional items. To my mind, they are.
I'm glad to hear that.
They are just I would see them as absolutely sustainability earns you the right to do your business, and technology will be the enabler of the only way to do your business. That's the way I look at both these bits. So why I'm saying this, let me tell you. Let me sort of. I think what we see. Let's take a look at this 4,000 acres of land that we are operating on. I think all of us are able to do this business that we do. You as flyers are able to fly out of this airport. Airlines and many other entities are able to do business in this campus because this land was, because thousands of farmers gave up their lives, their livelihood, their farms, their homes, and that's how we got access to this land where we do this business that we do right now. And that makes it absolutely incumbent upon us to make sure that we conduct our business in a responsible fashion and we earn our right to operate. And I think our right to operate comes from behaving responsibly. Apart from commitment to communities around us, I think a big element of that is sustainability. And Vijay, our sustainability journey is not something that we're commencing today. Like many other admirable companies in India, I think our sustainability journey, though we are ourselves a young company, it's only 13 years old, we're fairly advanced. So let me give you a few ideas of where we stand today. So across the 4,000 acre campus today, we are 100% energy neutral. All energy that we use in this entire campus comes from renewable sources. 75% of our energy comes from solar and 25% from wind. And our aim as we expand and grow and we are doubling the facilities that we have here is that we will continue to remain committed to renewable energy, and therefore we will be energy neutral at all points of time. Two, when this airport was established on this piece of land, the hue and cry in the city was, how can you establish an airport in the rain shadow area of Bangalore, where there is water scarcity? And from the moment we took charge of this land, we put in place a very elaborate and carefully orchestrated plan of rainwater harvesting. And over the last 10 years, we have achieved, and I think last year it was certified in partnership with the Indian Institute of Science. We've been certified as water positive with a water positivity index of 1.37. which means for every liter of water we consume in this campus, across the campus, gray water, white water, any kind of water, we produce 1.37 liters of water against consumption of every liter. From a carbon neutrality perspective, we've been carbon neutral for 4 years, level 3 and above. So we are carbon neutral from that standpoint. And we have we are in the midst of establishing a solid waste management plant today, which is going to be technologically one of the most marvelous solid waste management plant. Zero discharge to landfill from December this year, including plastics, anything that you can talk of. And of course, things like banning of single-use plastic and so on and so forth have happened a long time back. So sustainability is a huge, huge commitment from our side. And Bangalore Airport City Limited is a subsidiary of Bangalore International Airport Limited, a wholly owned subsidiary, and therefore it will embody all these aspects is given. So for example, some of the key features, apart from what I've already mentioned in the airport city, will be cycle tracks, walking will be encouraged, use of smart city framework to enable people to control their consumption and to be responsible for their consumption, ensuring that every building that's built, for the footprint it occupies, that much of green cover will have to be provided on the roof, and so on and so forth, are all inbuilt into the urban design guidelines that have been developed for the airport city. So I think sustainability is an absolute right. That's how we've earned our right to operate. And on technology bit, I think, this is something that we believe is going to be the future enabler of the way we do our business. So for instance, at the airport side, we've got an innovation lab out of which has been born the country's digital travel platform, DigiYatra. I don't know whether you've heard of it, but the biometric enabled travel program that the country has adopted was born in Bangalore Airport's innovation lab. And I think our other second pillar of the airport city being smart, we are ensuring that the airport city is being designed to be a smart city. So whether it's smart transport, smart electricity, smart water, and so on and so forth, there are 12 areas that we have identified where technology will play a key role in the airport city of the future. I can keep going on, but including talk about the 4 platforms that we are establishing, the digital platforms we are establishing, but I'm sure either I'll bore all of you or I'll take too much of your time.
No, we'll do a separate fireside chat on just the technology piece. But a question on sort of airport services. With the changing patterns, even sort of the kind of airlines operating, more budget airlines and full service airlines, what changes do you see in the need for airport services and opportunities for the hospitality sector?
Well, I think from an airport services perspective, first and foremost, I think service in airports is going to be defined by high tech, high touch, contactless service. And let me define that. High tech, of course, use of technology. High touch, I'm referring to in terms of high levels of personalization, but will also be contactless in nature. And I think that's going to be the defining sort of framework for services. What I see in airports, the possibility is that today, when you look at your airport experience, what's the first thing that strikes you? The first thing that strikes you is if you ask somebody to define your airport experience, it's actually a series of processes that one has to go through in the airport. At each of these processes, you produce a set of documents, most likely the same set of documents. And for each of these processes, you stand in line to get processed. So these are the 3 redeeming features that comes to your mind when you think about an airport experience. And using biometric technology, I think we have the capability to ensure that we can make these processes disappear. What we're looking at a single token, single touch point processing in airports of the future, which means that you will not realize that there are processes happen. Processes happen as you walk through the airport because it's using your facial biometrics to process you, right? And that's how the process of the future. I mean, I can elaborate on what technology behind that is because it's already functioning, but for, again, paucity of time, we won't get into that. Secondly, this frees up employee bandwidth to actually focus on personalizing services to consumers. at least from the airport context, what we see is that this enables us to occupy the mind space that has been freed up in the consumer's mind, to orchestrate and put forth to the consumer a whole series of unique experiences, surprises, personalized offerings, and so on and so forth, which can make the airport experience to be the most memorable part of his travel experience. That's how we've sort of defined it for ourselves.
Yeah, and you know, the memorable part is good. Today also we get a lot of surprises, but not the ones that are memorable. So hopefully, and will we get, you know, will we be able to get better food, better, you know, better range of food? But maybe we'll come to that, and maybe the hospitality sector can work with you to enhance that.
Oh, incidentally, that's a growing trend. More and more hotels have approached us for a role to play in airport services, and we're having some very interesting discussions with some airport companies. So that's an exciting part of. So there's a growing collaboration between two entities who are already part of the same ecosystem in the first place.
Yeah, you know, the problem is today on the planes you don't get much food, or you don't get interesting food. At the airports, if you're going to get sort of pretty standard stuff at sometimes atrocious prices, where does the customer go? So I think that's something that could be looked at. But I have a few minutes left. I want to ask you a little bit about yourself. You know, you run the airport, but what keeps your feet on the ground? Tell me what motivates you to do this and still stay pretty much feet on the ground.
Well, first and foremost, I think I love my job. It's a job that gives me great amount of satisfaction. It's a job which is constantly in creative mode, and you know, keeps me in a positive frame of mind, because ultimately it's a job that's linked to a much higher sense of purpose and nation building. So from a job perspective, it's a terrific thing to do. But having said that, I think what I pride myself on in terms of being grounded is because I think I keep a very healthy balance between my family and my commitment towards my family and my commitment towards work. Vijay, I work 5 days a week. I work only Monday to Friday. I don't work on Saturdays and Sundays.
You're lucky.
I try and maintain my work timings during the day as well. My wife will not necessarily agree with me that I work only 9 hours a day, but it's certainly not something that I do 24 hours. And by the way, this is not just my experience in the company, but we insist upon that for all our employees. Our operational staff work 4 days a week and have 3 days off, right? All our operational staff. But for the 4 days they work 12 hours a day. But it's 12 hours fixed, but 48 hours a week, but gives them 3 full days off, right? And for all the management staff, it's 5 days a week and 2 days off. So it's very important to make sure of that. Secondly, I think I make sure that I take time off for my own personal pursuits. I love reading books. I'm an avid learner. I love learning. I mean, it's unlikely that you can make a statement in front of me that I've not heard, and I will not be Googling it, or I'll not be searching upon it, because for me, I cannot afford not to know about something. I have this thirst for knowledge that is unquenchable. That keeps me excited. And last but not the least, I enjoy relationships. I have great friendships that I've nurtured over the last 30, 40 years. My friends from my hotel business days still remain very close friends, and I have nurtured those friendships over 30 plus years. And relationships with family and friends keep me grounded, and that's very important.
And of course, you didn't mention that you have you're a foodie. You love good food and you love good music, and I hope the hotels everywhere will take care of that for you. Coming to the end of time, do I have time for one question, two questions? A very quick question before I go to my last question. What is the risk of drones operation at airports?
Well, uncontrolled drone operations, you've seen examples of that globally, where drones have entered into airspace, and a small bird can bring a large aircraft down, because if it gets sucked into the engine, it can blow up the aircraft completely. And I think drones create the same risk. So one is the risk drones can create to aircrafts. The other one is drones being used to spy over airports. And third is drones being used from a security standpoint to break in, to drop a missile or to drop a bomb and things like that. So I think drones pose multiple risks to airports. And I think the good news is that the government of India has got a, first of all, currently there's a complete ban on drone operations within a 10-kilometer radius around airports, and it's punishable by law. If I'm not mistaken, it's non-bailable offense. And but there is a very good framework being developed for drone operations in the country today. But otherwise, according to me, at the moment, till it's unregulated, it's highly risky. For all the three reasons.
I agree with you. It is a risk. I mean, we saw it at the airport in London what happened, and yeah, we don't want that. Let's come to the last question. I know you have a hard stop. What are your 3 mantras for success?
So when you say success, I'm going to presume that this is for success in the business or
personal, professional, anything.
So let me okay, I'm going to take 2 minutes more than what is allotted to me, but I'm going to quickly break that down into two. Professional success, I would imagine, comes from 3 bits that are very important to me. One, remain fiercely obsessive with regards to customers. You must be obsessive about customer service. Number 2, deal with all your stakeholders with compassion, your employees, your vendors, your partners, and so on and so forth. So customer centricity, compassion, and third, be a voracious learner, right? Always add value to your professional knowledge. And from a personal standpoint, I would say 3 very important things that I would suggest to you is: 1, invest in relationships, because nothing matters as much as relationships do. 2, invest in your health. If you're not healthy, you really can't live a good life if you're not healthy. So invest in relationships, invest in health, and third, invest in acquiring experiences, because that's what you're going to remember your life by as years go by. Acquiring high quality, meaningful, fun experiences. So that's in a nutshell.
That's fantastic, and I like the way you've broken it up between the two. So actually, we've got now 6 mantras for success for a person at home or in his personal life and in his professional life. But that's fantastic, and I really look forward to not only the relationship but many other of the mantras being put in play and sort of by a lot of people, and to get good experiences across our hospitality sector. Our hospitality sector provides the experiences. People need to come and enjoy that, and hopefully we'll have sort of, as you said, and I concur with you, a recovery that's sooner than later, and a recovery that's really robust over the next 2 years. Thank you so much for your time, Hari, and all the best.
Thank you for having me here. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Good day.
Good day.
Thank you for attending this webinar or this fireside chat, really, and look forward to our next fireside chat in about a month's time from now. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.